Almost everyone has been to a job interview, or will have one in the future, and sometimes a job interview can change your life. Today I want to tell you a story about the most unusual job interview I have ever had. At first, everything seemed normal, but then something completely unexpected happened. Listen carefully. My name is Alex, and today I want to tell you a story. It is a story about a job interview, but not just any job interview. This is the job interview I will never forget. A few years ago, I was looking for a new job. At that time, I was working for a small company, but I felt that I needed a change. I wanted to learn new things, I wanted new challenges, and I wanted to grow professionally. So I started searching for job opportunities online. Every evening after work, I would open my laptop and browse job websites. I carefully read job descriptions. I checked company websites, and I sent many applications. Sometimes the process of looking for a job can feel exhausting. You write your resume, you prepare your cover letter, you send your application, and then you wait. Sometimes you wait for days, sometimes for weeks, and sometimes you never receive a reply. But one day, something interesting happened. I received an email. It was from a company called Bright Solutions. They wrote that they had reviewed my application, and they invited me to a job interview. I remember feeling very excited, and also a little nervous, because job interviews can be stressful. The interview was scheduled for Friday morning at 10 a.m. That gave me 3 days to prepare, and I decided to prepare very carefully. First, I researched the company. I visited their website. I read about their projects. I learned about their team and their values. Then I practiced answering common interview questions. Questions like, tell us about yourself. Why do you want to work here? What are your strengths and weaknesses? I stood in front of the mirror and practiced speaking clearly. I also practiced speaking slowly and confidently, because confidence is very important during an interview. The night before the interview, I prepared everything. I chose my clothes, a clean shirt, a nice jacket, comfortable but professional shoes. I printed my resume, and I placed everything neatly in my bag. Then I set my alarm clock. I wanted to arrive early, because arriving late to a job interview is never a good idea. The next morning, I woke up early, earlier than usual. I made myself a cup of coffee, and I tried to relax. But I could feel that familiar interview nervousness. You probably know that feeling. Your mind starts asking questions. What if I forget what to say? What if they ask a difficult question? What if I make a mistake? But I took a deep breath and reminded myself, this is just a conversation, a professional conversation, and I decided to stay positive. After breakfast, I checked the address again. The company office was located downtown, in a modern glass building. I left my apartment early so I would have plenty of time. The train ride took about 20 minutes. During the ride, I reviewed some notes on my phone. I looked at the company website again, and I practiced a few answers in my head. Finally, I arrived at the building. I stood in front of the entrance and looked up. The building was tall and impressive. I remember thinking, this looks like a great place to work. But I still had no idea that something very unexpected was about to happen. Inside the building, the lobby was bright and modern. There was a large reception desk. Behind the desk sat a friendly receptionist. She smiled and asked, "Good morning. How can I help you?" I introduced myself. "Good morning. My name is Alex. I have a job interview at 10 a.m. She checked her computer and nodded. "Yes, Alex, welcome. Please take the elevator to the 4th floor." I thanked her and walked toward the elevator. At that moment, My heart started beating a little faster. This was it. The interview was about to begin. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside, and I had no idea that the next few minutes would turn into the most unusual job interview experience of my life. When the elevator doors opened on the 4th floor, I stepped out into a quiet hallway. The office looked modern and professional. The walls were white and clean. Large windows allowed a lot of natural light to enter the space. At the end of the hallway, I saw another reception desk. Behind the desk sat a young woman working on her computer. She looked up and smiled politely. "Good morning," she said. "How can I help you?" I walked toward the desk and introduced myself. "Good morning. My name is Alex. I have a job interview scheduled for 10 o'clock. She checked her computer for a moment. Then she nodded. "Yes, Alex, we were expecting you." Her voice sounded friendly and calm. "Please have a seat. Someone will come to get you shortly." I thanked her and sat down in the waiting area. There were several comfortable chairs and a small coffee table. On the table were a few magazines and a company brochure. I picked up the brochure and started reading.
It described the company's mission, their values, and their recent projects. The company seemed innovative and ambitious. The more I read, the more interested I became in the job. But at the same time, my nervousness slowly returned. Job interviews can be strange moments. You want to appear confident, but inside, you often feel uncertain. You start thinking about every possible question they might ask. You wonder if your answers will sound intelligent, and you hope you will make a good impression. While I was thinking about these things, something unexpected happened. A man suddenly rushed into the waiting area. He looked slightly out of breath, as if he had been walking very fast. He glanced around the room and then sat down in the chair next to me. For a few seconds, he didn't say anything. Then he turned to me and smiled. "Are you here for the interview too?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, I am." He extended his hand. "My name is Daniel." I shook his hand. "Nice to meet you. I'm Alex." Daniel seemed relaxed and confident, much more relaxed than I felt at that moment. "So," he said, "are you nervous?" I laughed a little. "A little bit, yes." He nodded. "That's completely normal. Job interviews always make people nervous." Then he leaned back in his chair. "I actually enjoy them." I looked at him, surprised. "You enjoy job interviews?" I asked. He smiled. "Yes, I see them as conversations." "That's an interesting way to think about it," I said. "Exactly," he replied. "A job interview is just a conversation between two people who want to learn more about each other." His calm attitude made me feel slightly more relaxed. We started talking casually about work, careers, and professional goals. Daniel told me that he had worked in several different companies before. He had experience in project management and business development. He spoke clearly and confidently. After a few minutes, I began to wonder if he was actually another candidate, or maybe he worked for the company. Before I could ask him, the receptionist stood up and walked toward us. "Alex?" she said. "Yes," I answered. "Please follow me. The interview will begin now." I stood up and took a deep breath. This is it, I thought. As I started walking toward the meeting room, Daniel smiled at me. "Good luck," he said. "Thank you," I replied. The receptionist led me down the hallway and opened a large conference room door. Inside the room, there was a large table and several chairs. A laptop and a notebook were placed neatly on the table. "Please take a seat," she said. "The interviewer will be here in just a moment." I sat down and tried to calm my breathing. A few seconds later, the door opened, and when I looked up, I was completely surprised, because the person who entered the room was Daniel, the man I had just been talking to in the waiting area. He smiled and sat down across from me. "Well," he said calmly,
I guess our interview has already started. And at that moment, I realized that the entire conversation in the waiting room had actually been part of the interview. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I was completely surprised. Just a few minutes ago, Daniel and I were sitting in the waiting area having a normal conversation, and now he was sitting across the table as the interviewer. Daniel smiled when he saw my confused expression. "Yes," he said kindly, "I am the hiring manager." I laughed a little. "Well, I definitely didn't expect that." "That was the idea," he replied. Then he leaned forward slightly. "You see, interviews can be very artificial. Many people prepare answers that sound perfect, but they are not always natural." He paused for a moment. "That's why I like to meet candidates before the interview begins. In the waiting room, people are usually more relaxed. They speak naturally, and I can see who they really are." I nodded. Suddenly, everything made sense. Our casual conversation had not been random at all. It had been the first part of the interview. Daniel opened a notebook. "So, Alex," he said, "let's continue our conversation." Now I felt much calmer. In fact, I almost forgot that this was a job interview. We talked about my previous work experience. I explained the projects I had worked on. I described some challenges I had faced in my previous job. We discussed teamwork, communication, and problem solving. Daniel asked thoughtful questions, but the conversation felt relaxed, almost like two colleagues talking about work. At one point, he asked, "What motivates you in your career?" I thought for a moment. Then I answered honestly, "I like solving problems, and I like learning new things. I enjoy working with people who are curious and motivated." Daniel nodded. "That's exactly the kind of attitude we value here." The interview continued for about 30 minutes. By the end, I felt much more confident. Before the interview ended, Daniel asked one final question. "Do you have any questions for me?" This is a common interview question, and it's always good to ask something. So I asked about the company culture. "What do you enjoy most about working here?" I asked. Daniel smiled. "That's easy," he said. "The people. Everyone here enjoys learning and improving, and we try to create an environment where people support each other." That sounded like a place I would enjoy working. Finally, Daniel closed his notebook. "Thank you for coming today," he said. "We will review all candidates and contact you soon." I stood up and shook his hand. "Thank you for the opportunity," I replied. Then I left the building. As I walked outside into the fresh air, I felt relieved. Job interviews can be stressful, but this one had been different. It had felt natural and surprisingly enjoyable. A few days later, I received an email. It was from Daniel. My heart started beating faster as I opened it. The message was short, but it contained wonderful news. They offered me the job. And that is how I experienced the most unusual job interview of my life. And now I have a question for you. Have you ever had a job interview? What was the most difficult question you were asked? Write your answer in the comments. I'd love to read your experiences. And if you enjoy listening to English stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. This is the Rocket English Podcast, the place where your English takes off. See you in the next episode.